Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where last episode we managed to get our monstrosity all the way over to Eve, and that is absolutely wonderful. I also untracked all of the debris that we left behind, so that is no longer clogging up our processing, so that is wonderful. Now we need to go into the VAB, and we need to launch another monstrosity. Well, only the pushing component of it. We don't need to dock this up here. We need to dock it up in orbit of Eve. So let's load up our pusher vehicle. Here we go. And once this gets loaded, we're just going to lift this thing off. And we don't need to dock it up here. We just need to take it over to Eve. So that is excellent. It is probably going to be performing better. I hope. Okay. And let's just put this thing out on the pad and get it launched. So, I wonder how this performance is going to be. I don't actually remember. It's been a while. This will be interesting. So we just need to target getting this thing up reasonably high, right? And then just bringing it over to Eve is all we need to do. So, that seemed very normal. Okay, now we're at a much more normal angle. Let's throttle it up, and let's lift on off. Eventually, the game will get caught up, and we will start to fly. In theory. Yep, we definitely have first motion. But this is cruising along at a very, very respectable frame rate. And by respectable frame rate, I mean the other thing. That this is not that. No doubt about it, but off we go. So, we're just holding in the lock position right now. I want to check to see, yeah, our orbital speed is not very good right now. I just want to lock us in the up position for the moment. So we're going to burn here for a while, and we need to scroll up here to know where the SRBs are in this fuel regimen. So there we go. We can see they've burned off some amount of fuel already. In fact, they've burned a fair amount. Almost 10 tons of fuel per SRB already burned off. It's ridiculous how much this has to move, but that is absolutely to be expected. So this is fine, it's nice and rigid, and we're just going to bring this up until we have an apoapsis of probably something similar to 30 or 40 kilometers before we start a gravity turn here, would be my guess. Now, I'm going to make, there's not even a point in quick saving at this point. If we run into physics issues, we're going to have to revert. But I'm going to try running this in 4x. I am not convinced it's going to go well. Well, it definitely changed the audio. The frame rate is lower, but I think the overall game speed is higher. We're gaining almost a meter per second per frame here. So, I mean, it's quite a slideshow. No doubt about that. There's no doubt about it here. We are getting about 1 FPS on 4x speed. But overall, I think that this is not a bad thing. I think we just want to continue punching it up like this for a while. But the next major thing that's going to happen is SRB detachment. And that's not going to happen for a fair amount of time here. So we definitely want to push up our apoapsis to like 20 or 30 kilometers. We are currently, once we get a couple more frames in here, we're going to be at 1 kilometer. So that's definitely noted. So it's a much higher frame rate at 1x, that's for sure. So if we drop it back down to 1x, we can see that frame rate is significantly higher. It's not good, but it's higher. However, I'm noticing that we had a bit of rotational drift during that time period. So we maybe want to keep it on 1x, which is not ideal at all. But our goal for this episode is to get this thing into orbit, and from there we can start shifting it over next episode towards Eve. That's the idea. And in theory, this thing is not that complicated. Once we get rid of the SRBs, I would expect us to have reasonable performance. Certainly once we get rid of the vector engines. The vector engines are definitely one of the big drags on performance, but they're necessary because of how weak the Mammoth 2s are. So I feel like this is absolutely necessary to have it be like this. But we would definitely have higher game performance if we had Mammoth 2s on this. Now, I'm doing a little bit of manual correction of our attitude here. Something about like that. That'll be reasonably fine. And we can see we have moved up to about 123 meters per second. So our apoapsis is now up to about 2,500 kilometers, or 2,500 meters. If only it was up to 2,500 kilometers. That would be nice. But no, we're at 2,500 meters. And that is absolutely fine for now. We want to push this up to be about 10 times higher than it is right now before we start our gravity turn. I just want to make sure we get up high enough. That's the main concern here. So we're utilizing the SRB thrust to get ourselves up high enough so that the thrust on the vectors will be less problematic, is the idea. Because if we ditch the SRBs too low in the atmosphere, our thrust to weight is not going to be great. I mean, it'll be probably fine. Vectors do perform okay at sea level, but they absolutely perform better the higher up you get them. So that is definitely noted. We're now coming up on about 4 kilometers apoapsis, so that is something, anyway. And I do want to start shifting us over fairly soon to a gravity turn, but we are nowhere near high enough for that right now. It feels like we should be because of where we are in the flight, in terms of like how long it's been since we started the flight. But in reality, how long has it been? Like, this episode has been going for 7 minutes. It's been 35 seconds. So, yeah, not all of the episode was that, but we started this flight at, like, I think 2 minutes into the episode or so. So it's been going for about 5 minutes, and we've gotten 37 seconds in. Performance is not great, but that's fine. We know that it's not going to be great. It will get substantially better in the future. Once we get this thing up into orbit and get rid of these vector engines, I do suspect that performance on this will be pretty solid. There's not that much to this pusher vehicle, to be honest. There's not that many parts, not that many engines. It should be okay. In theory. In theory. So we're now coming up on an apoapsis of about 6,500 meters, and we're going to be pushing 7 kilometers soon. We're definitely getting a lot of acceleration here, no doubt about that. Keep in mind, we're only 40 seconds into this flight at this point. So that is absolutely fine. And we've burned off about half of our SRB fuel at this point. So that looks reasonably good. Everything is proceeding apace. We're a little off on our rotation here. I'm going to work on correcting that a moment here. Okay, the rotation is correcting. Let's bring this back now. I would prefer not to overcorrect it, but at this resolution of control, and by that I mean the frame rate, at this resolution of control, it's going to be extremely difficult to get, like, fine-tuned controls, right? This isn't surprising in any meaningful way. So I'm just going to park it about here. And hopefully, the SAS will control it from here, but it's going to be very complicated for it to do so. We're now crossing an apoapsis of 10 kilometers, which means that we are roughly 1/3 of the way there, and that first third is the most difficult third. No doubt about it. So we're continuing to accelerate, crossing 300 meters per second now. We are, of course, a little over 10% of the way to orbital velocity. But right now, it's the apoapsis that is much, much more concerning. So that is absolutely fine. 12 kilometers apoapsis, and that's definitely going up more and more rapidly. The real question is, are we going to have a safe detachment of these SRBs? And I believe that we are. That's the current theory anyway. It seemed safely replicable when we did it last time. Specifically, the SRBs did impact the side of the other tanks, but they destroyed themselves, not the other tanks. So that's fine. Okay, we need to arrest this rotational momentum a bit. Something about like that. That looks much better. Cool. We're now crossing a 15-kilometer apoapsis, which means we are currently halfway to our apoapsis target. That looks good. And we're still rotating. Okay, let's see about bringing that down a little bit. Now on the other side. Something like that. Hopefully. Hopefully. So we've got about 40 tons of fuel left in our SRBs. That's about 1/3 fuel remaining in the SRBs. And we are now crossing about 400 meters per second here in just a moment. We're now crossing the 1-minute marker in this flight here about 5 minutes later. This is not great performance, and you can blame KSP2 for that. I have nothing to do with this. Except for, you know, this being a bit of a monstrosity, but that's very normal. That is very, very normal. So we're 45 seconds away from our apoapsis right now, which has crossed the 20-kilometer marker. I want to bring that up a little higher. Specifically, I want to, and I want this at sea level altitude right now, I want to have our apoapsis crossing 30 before we start going over. So that'll be fine for now. Our SRBs have about 30 tons remaining, or about 1/4. Actually, I think that's a little under a quarter, isn't it? No, it should be, it's slightly under a quarter, because there's 123 tons. So yeah, slightly under a quarter, that's fine. And our apoapsis is now crossing 25 kilometers. We're going to be starting our gravity turn very, very shortly here. I'm going to flip us into stability assist, and we're going to go into orbital mode here. I just wanted to see where the prograde marker was. Okay, so we're going to hold here still for a little bit until our apoapsis crosses 30, and then we're going to head to the prograde marker. So we're at 28 right now. 29. And 30 kilometers. Over we go to prograde. We see some heat gauges up here. That is not unusual. We saw that previously, and there weren't actually issues with it. The question is, are we going to overshoot this and tumble? I want to start arresting this momentum a bit. Okay, I feel like this was the right call. Now I'm going to let it head over again. Okay. Yep, I just didn't want this to build up too much momentum there. So we're just going to hold this on prograde. And that seems fine. Okay, hold prograde. We've got 16 tons of fuel left in our solid boosters. We're continuing to push upwards, and our speed is definitely increasing. I'm keeping an eye on our docking port here. If that burns off, that is a catastrophic failure, but I don't believe it will. Cool. So our orbital velocity is going up nicely, but it's got a ways to go. No doubt about that. We've still got 12 tons, or about 10% fuel left in these SRBs, so we're just trying to let our stability, well, stabilize. We're trying to let our heading stabilize here. And it looks like it mostly has. Mostly. We've got a little bit of rocking going on, but this is fine. 9 tons remaining in these SRBs, and we're going to be jettisoning them fairly shortly. We can see our apoapsis is still within the atmosphere, but it's pretty high up in the atmosphere. That is an apoapsis of about 50 kilometers at this moment. Bit of a lighting flicker there. I'm not sure what that was, but whatever. That's a 50-kilometer apoapsis at this point. Looks good. That still needs to go up a fair amount. Under 5 tons of fuel left in these SRBs. We're going to be jettisoning them very shortly here. So that, of course, means our thrust to weight is going to considerably drop, and that's absolutely fine. For the moment, I want to be continuing to push prograde here. I don't want to be going horizontal just yet, although we probably will a little later on. I don't know, that kind of depends on what apoapsis we're targeting. It doesn't really matter, I suppose. But these solid rocket motors are now out of fuel. So let's get rid of them. Eventually, the game will get caught up on that. Oh. That was so loud. I apologize for that. That did not go well. Okay, so we're seeing these solid rocket motors eliminating each other from the gene pool, if you will. And that's all fine. It looks like we have a nice clean detachment here. And getting rid of these SRBs is, of course, going to help the game's performance, if it doesn't help our rocket's performance. I am noticing our heat here. Okay. I'm currently working on turning us because I'm very concerned about the heat on that docking port, and I don't want it to be taking the brunt of these heating forces right now. Okay. So I'm moving us over towards the horizon here to reduce the heat load on it. Okay, let's bring ourselves back over here, arresting this momentum a little bit. The heat load on this should be going down because we're going up, and it's no longer being pointed directly at the prograde marker. That said, we're overshooting this at this moment, and I want to bring this back over. Come on, get that momentum arrested. Okay. We're holding here. We're going to start going back the other way. Perfect. You can see our apoapsis is going down right now, which is not what we want to be doing. We want to be pushing up our apoapsis, and we want to be doing it at an angle somewhere around here. But you can see our heat did indeed drop considerably from that. So that is good. I was very, very worried about that. So let's just bring this over and start bringing that apoapsis back up into vacuum. And I want to park us somewhere around here or so, ideally. Okay, let's just hold it here. We can see our orbital velocity is increasing right now. We can see our apoapsis is also increasing for the moment. So yeah, I'm just going to hold it here. This is fine. Let's drop our heading down a little bit. We're on 93 degrees. I'd like to drop it down to 90 exactly, but we're not going to be exactly on that heading. We're going to overshoot this now too, aren't we? A little bit, I think. That's not too bad. Okay, something like that will do for now. We can see our apoapsis is already pushing out above the atmosphere. So as long as we're not going to have heat issues, I want to point us right at the horizon here. I want to be getting horizontal speed. I no longer care about vertical velocity. So as long as we are going to be heading out of the atmosphere, I want to be over this way. Right on that horizon marker is the ideal scenario. Okay. Something kind of like this. This thing is heavy and very unwieldy, especially with this frame rate to fly, but it's okay. Cool. So something about like that or so. That'll do. We can see our apoapsis is plenty high up, and the question is time to apoapsis. 1 minute, 26 seconds right now. Ooh, we're drifting over beyond the horizon here. This is drifting too far. I see we dropped to 125. It's hard to gauge with the game running at the speed that it is what our actual thrust to weight is right now. It'd be nice if the game told us, but it doesn't. Unlike KSP1 or Juno New Origins, we just have to guess. So that's understood. It seems like this is going down at a reasonable rate. So we're probably going to have to nose up a little bit here is my current guess, but this has to be done just through guesswork for right now. I think this is going down at roughly 1 second per game second. So that is understood. However, the natural movement of this should be to be nosing up. So for the moment, I think this is reasonably fine. I want to continue burning here until such a time as we're like maybe 30 seconds away from the apoapsis. We're still quite a long ways away from the apoapsis right now. Then at that point, we could consider nosing up. Or maybe when the prograde marker makes its way down to like 15 or 20 degrees over here. But for now, I want to continue burning horizontally. We're at about 50 kilometers altitude. It's not quite as high as we'd like to be right now, because I would like to consider extending the solar panels. For the moment, I'm not too concerned about it. Okay. So for now, this seems reasonably fine. That apoapsis is going to continue to push up, but what we need currently more than anything is just horizontal velocity. We currently have an orbital velocity of about 970, and keep in mind we need like 2300 or something along those lines, depending on what our final apoapsis ends up being, of course. So we need about 1300 more dV in this, is what I'm saying. And judging by how quickly this is going down and this is not going up, we don't actually have 1690 in this. So the question is, do we have enough delta V in this to push ourselves up to orbital velocity? Perhaps not, but I think it's going to be very close. Actually, that might be going down at about the right rate. Now that I time it a bit and look at the speed at which it's changing, that might be about right. And of course, orbital speed is not exactly analogous to lateral speed, right? So that is definitely something to consider here. We are getting more and more quote-unquote efficiency on our orbital speed as our lateral speed goes up. So that is definitely something to consider here as well. I think, if I remember correctly, this pushes us up to be very close to orbital velocity, but not quite in orbital velocity, and we had to burn a tiny, tiny amount of our hydrogen fuel to actually achieve orbit, if I recall correctly. That said, it appears right now like we've got a good amount of speed, so there's that. We're not out of the atmosphere yet, so we do still have some drag that we're fighting, and that is absolutely understood. 1 minute 14 to our apoapsis right now, so that is definitely still coming down, but I think it's not coming down tremendously quickly. Let's keep an eye on it, and on the next time update, yeah, 113, and we're at 217, 218. Okay, so if we're at 219 and it's 112, then we know that we're about a 1 second per second thrust to weight, and we are not achieving a sufficient thrust to weight to do this. At which point I would go to prograde. However, we're at 220, and this is at 113. So this tick down is slowing down. I think we have the time to do this. Beautiful. So I believe our thrust to weight to be high enough to achieve the orbit, assuming our delta V is at this point. I'm going to continue to burn here, in theory, until our apoapsis reaches like 100 or 150 or... I don't know. We'll see what that ends up looking like. We just need to get as much lateral speed as we can for the time being. We are still in atmosphere at this point. We are 61 kilometers up. And we definitely need to continue to gain on this, but yeah, look at this. Our apoapsis is going up a lot faster now. That is a very good sign. We have nosed up a little bit, and I'm going to shift this over. Like I said, our natural tendency based on our directionality here will be to nose up. So I want to shift us over a little bit towards the horizon line here. About there. And that might cause this to start ticking down again, maybe. Yeah, it ticked down there. That's expected. Okay, so something along the lines of this for right now. I want more lateral speed and less apoapsis at this point. Although getting more apoapsis is good. I don't want to have our apoapsis dropping, but I do want to be maximizing our lateral speed and minimizing our apoapsis right now. So somewhere around here, moving over slightly more would be good, but this is about as good as we're going to get for the moment, I'm afraid. And you can see that natural drift bringing us back up over this way. There's also a little bit of residual speed, I think, but that's fine. Cool. So this seems good for the moment. We are crossing 65 kilometers. We have 1,100 meters per second left in this, allegedly, which should be sufficient to achieve orbit. Although we have a long ways to go on our orbital velocity, that's for sure. We're at 65 kilometers, so we are still experiencing some amount of drag here. We're 2 minutes and 36 seconds into this flight, and it's been, like 24 minutes. So this is at like 10% of the actual game speed is what the game is running at here, which is not ideal. This is due to 81 vector engines, I believe. But once we get rid of those vector engines, it should get a lot better. We have crossed an apoapsis of 80 kilometers at this time. And we are currently at 67 kilometers of altitude. So this is looking very good. We still allegedly have a kilometer per second in the tank, and we'll see how that ends up going. And then, of course, all of this, which is claiming to be about 10,000 meters per second. I'm not sure what the actual number on that is. That may or may not be accurate. KSP2 is very confusing about what it thinks DV amounts are going to be. It's not particularly accurate. So that is definitely a concern. Cool. You can definitely see we've drifted a little bit off of the horizon here. I'm okay with that. You can see that our time to apoapsis is increasing at this point. That is a very good thing. I want to bring us back over here and just park us right at that horizon, about like this. Looks good. We want to be getting purely lateral speed at this point, if we can at all help it. We're about to cross into vacuum as of right now. We no longer are experiencing drag. So that's very good. We see that time to apoapsis pushing out. Again, that's a very, very good sign here. And we do need about another 700 meters per second or so to achieve orbit. You can see we've got 882 here. I don't think this number is completely accurate. I think this is overestimating the DV here a little bit, but we'll see. We've definitely raised up that periapsis a lot, but I want to bring that apoapsis up to about 100 kilometers, and that's where we're going to look to circularize. However, we can definitely extend our solar panels at this time, which I'm going to do. Hopefully that works. Yes, those are definitely moving. Okay, good. So that looks great. We're currently moving at about 1,700 meters per second. And definitely continuing to accelerate as our thrust to weight comes up here. You can see once again we've drifted off of this line. Our natural tendency is to move this way because of our prograde direction of our orbit. So this is fine. This is absolutely a-okay. I'm not worried about it. We could be burning right at the prograde marker if we really wanted to, but I'm not too concerned about it right now. I think we just continue to burn here, and we raise that apoapsis up. It's going to start going up rather quickly soon. It's definitely accelerating the speed at which it's increasing. So we're at 88 kilometers as of now. And yeah, that's going up quite a lot faster now. 88.5. And that is 89 kilometers there. Beautiful. So yeah, it's definitely increasing the speed at which it's going up, which is fully expected. Cool. We're currently about 1 minute 49 seconds from the apoapsis. That seems fine. And we've got 600 meters per second left here, allegedly. Again, I'm not entirely sure how accurate those numbers are, but I'm going to bring us up to an apoapsis of 100 kilometers, and we'll see what we can do for a circularization burn here. I'm not 100% certain that it's going to be, fully functional, but we'll see how it goes. And again, we probably should have run fuel lines in here. I forgot to do that. I mentioned it last time. We probably should have done that. That would have been, I think, a little more efficient, but it's okay. So we're currently crossing 2 kilometers per second in orbital speed. That is fantastic. Allegedly, we've got 500 meters per second left in this. We'll see, again, how real that is. But we're most of the way at this point to orbital velocity. So that is looking wonderful. We're crossing the 100 kilometer threshold now. Engines off. And let's see about a circularization burn. So, create a maneuver plan, and we are going to burn here, if we can. There we go. Okay, that's an overburn at that point. So we're looking for a burn that is something like this. That'll do. That puts our periapsis at 97 and our apoapsis at 101. That's good enough. So that'll be fine. We're going to get turned here, and this is going to be 2 minutes and 45 seconds until this burn begins, but that's okay. It is past time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and next episode, we're going to get this circularized and heading off to Eve. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Xenocyte, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.